Welcome to Lead and Follow, a podcast that explores how great collaboration actually happens. I'm your host, Sharna Fabiano, author of the book Lead and Follow, The Dance of Inspired Teamwork. And I'm pleased to bring you the latest research, insights, and learning methods to help you work together better with the people around you. I help founders, solopreneurs, and new leaders become great at collaborating because I've seen how much more becomes possible when people integrate their ideas, perspectives, and strengths in a practical way. To learn more about coaching with me and for a one-time discount on your first session, go to sharnafabiano.com/coaching and enter the promo code podcast. The link is in the show notes. And now, here's the episode. Today I'm speaking with Veronica Toumanova. Veronica has been dancing tango since the year 2000 and actively teaching and performing since 2007. She has Russian origins, but started dancing tango while living in the Netherlands. She has worked with different partners, performing and teaching in France, Sweden, Norway, the UK, Italy, the Netherlands, Cyprus, Greece, Germany, Czech Republic, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Switzerland, Canada, and the US. Veronica is an elegant dancer with a strong personality and a refined sense of music. She has extensive knowledge of both the follower and the leader's role and is especially known for her in-depth technique classes. She is also a popular tango blogger, her essays on tango being translated into 18 languages, and she has recently published the second volume of her Why Tango essay collection. I personally am a longtime admirer of Veronica's writing, dancing, and thinking, and so it's really a thrill and a pleasure for me to speak with her today. I'm looking forward to hearing her thoughts on how leading and following are evolving within the tango dance community in Paris and in Europe, and what inspiring lessons they may have for life and work outside dance. Veronica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
So I want to start by asking you about a really special event that you were part of organizing just this past September 2024. And this was the international conference in Berlin called Tango Connects. Can you tell us a little bit about this project?
So in September, not last September, but the September before, I was contacted by a friend who runs one of the oldest tango schools in Berlin called New Tango. And they were going to have their 20th anniversary. And he said, for the 20th anniversary, I would like to do a special kind of event. And I would like to organize a conference in which we invite people to talk about tango and what tango means for people. Would you like to do it with me? And I said, sure, that sounds like a thing for me with all my articles. And we got together a team of friends who are also tango dancers, and some are, they have a tango school. Another friend is a DJ and a longtime tango dancer. And we've come up with a topic for the first edition, which we called the healing power of tango. Because when we were talking about the conference, we all realized, being long-time tango addicts, that tango does something to you which makes a lot of people undergo a deep psychological transformation thanks to practicing this dance. And you see it in yourself, but also when you are a professional, you see it in your students, you see it in your friends. Sometimes the person changes so much from when they start tango to when they are already experienced tango dancer or a professional, that you can almost speak about a therapeutic power of tango. And we wanted to invite non-tango people, so experts in psychology, therapy, neurology, medicine, coaching, life coaching, career coaching, to try to put into words, what is it exactly that makes tango such a special activity? You don't find necessarily that kind of healing power in other activities. So as tango people, we have some ideas about it, and I've written about it also. So I had some ideas about what it is. But we wanted to unite tango people with people from professional fields surrounding psychology and therapy, and together to come with some clear conclusions about what it is, this healing power of tango, and how can we use it in a more conscious, deliberate way. And what was very beautiful is that we had some experts who were speaking about trauma. And for me personally, this was one of the highlights of this conference, is this coming together of the understanding that trauma makes you disconnect from yourself and therefore also from others, isolates you. And to heal from trauma, you need to connect to yourself, to your true self, and through that connect to other people. And when you dance tango, you are required to do just that. You are required to connect to yourself, but through your body, through bodily sensations and to the floor and to the music, and then also through an intimate embrace to connect to another person. And then through changing partners and sharing one space to connect to everyone else in the same space. And so the main conclusion was actually that the healing power of tango comes from the fact that you are learning how to connect to other people on several levels. And you don't only connect intellectually, you connect through your body, through your emotions, through your feeling for the music, through joint activity, through challenges. And a lot of people face their demons when they start dancing tango and face their traumas when they start dancing tango. And it's not necessarily that tango will always heal you, but it will provide both the triggers and the environment that is fairly safe to undergo this transformation towards healing. You still have to do it. You still have to undergo and take some risks. For some people, tango will also always be more of an escape from their life than a healing journey. But tango has this promise of a healing, which is very powerful. So for me, that was like the main conclusion of that conference.
I feel like you've just articulated a thing that I have had in my intuitive sense, for so many years. And I will add that we'll put the link to the conference because there are still some recordings, if I'm not mistaken, that you can listen to. So we'll put that in the show notes. I want to, before we go on, ask, since we are here on the Lead and Follow podcast, how the training of leading and following, or the practicing of that, contributes to the feeling of connection, which seems to unlock this healing opportunity.
So when we use the words lead and follow in various aspects in our life, we often use it more of as a model that says command and obey, which is actually a very wrong understanding of what leading and following really is. And tango puts you into a context where you have to revise this understanding and realize that it is not about command and obey, but it is more about having a conversation. Only you're having this conversation through movement and joint feeling for the music. And in tango, you learn that true leadership is way more about listening and understanding the other person and their movement and their body and their musical interpretation. And following, instead of obeying, is way more about taking a deliberate decision to collaborate with your leader. If the follower decides not to collaborate, there cannot be any leading. The leader cannot do anything. If I, as a follower, decide I'm not going where you're leading me, everything stops there. So for me, following is an extremely active role. And in many aspects of life, we see following as uniquely passive role. And tango suddenly changes this perception, and it shows you that leading and following is just a matter of creating a conversation where you do have these two roles, but it's way more of a play and a collaboration than it is about some kind of hierarchy of who is more important or who decides what. You have different responsibilities. For example, as a follower, I don't need to think about what kind of next steps we're going to dance. I don't need to care so much about navigating the ronda. However, I do have other responsibilities. I have to be constantly listening to the next proposition of lead from my leader and actively respond to this. And every time I need to choose my response, be it consciously or intuitively. And another thing about following that you learn in Tango is to bypass your analytical thinking and to trust your intuitive thinking. So maybe you know the book, Slow Thinking, Fast Thinking. So it refers to this model that we can make decisions based on our intuition, which are often instantaneous. Our intuition is nurtured by all the information and our experience, but it's also about our authentic self reacting in a certain way to a situation. And analytical mind, when we go through this rational thinking process to deliver a decision, it usually takes more time. And what followers need to learn from the beginning is to bypass the analytical and to trust their intuitive response. And in the beginning, it might be the wrong response because they're kind of like a chicken without the head, like, I don't know where I'm going. But with experience, you start trusting your own body to react adequately to a specific body signal from your leader. So you unlock the possibility of getting into what we call the flow state. Because the flow state is when not only you are doing something, but you feel like this activity is being done through you. Like the activity does you way more than you do the activity. You become what it is you do. And in dance, when you reach this moment of I am dance, dance is happening through me, and I am at once in control, but also completely in the flow. It's almost like in the altered state of consciousness. It's an extremely powerful state of being. It unlocks a pleasure that you almost cannot find in other activities because you are moving to music at the same time. And this combination of I'm in control, but also something is in control of me, this is what true following is. It's trusting your intuition and trusting your leader and trusting the conversation that you're having. And for many people, this requirement to trust yourself and to trust the other is where they are confronted with their traumas. Because trauma, the first thing the trauma does, it removes the trust in yourself. Because often when abuse happens, you feel like you've let yourself down. And of course, the trust in others because somebody abused you. And to go into that trust of yourself and the other, this is also what makes Tango so healing.
Veronica, I love your writing, and I want to read just a little quote from one of your articles, which we will link in the show notes, about leading and following. You write, quote, "From my own experience as dancer and teacher, I have the impression that leading and following in Tango works well for the simple reason that all of us lead and follow other people in our everyday life all the time," unquote. I love this because it kind of flips the script on our assumptions so much, that we think these are things that are really hard or that we have to, I don't know. I mean, of course, we do need to train, right, to dance tango well, but the idea that leading and following is innate, I just love that. It's just such a big epiphany. So I'd like to have you speak a little bit more about, what that means for you.
Yes, it was an epiphany for me. At some point, I got to a level in Tango where I could walk into a room, see a completely unknown high-level dancer, being myself already fairly high-level dancer, go dance in tandem with him or her, him mostly, a male leader, and do such incredibly intricate stuff in terms of figures and sequences and musical interpretation, sometimes super fast, sometimes with a level of connection that is almost mystical, like magic, like time and space disappearing. And then I started asking myself, how is that possible that we can arrive at that level of connection that allows this synchronization and this conversation we're having through movement to such a degree of precision and complexity? And for me, just training the steps and training the connection didn't completely explain it. So as a teacher, what I know is that, and I also know it from literature about how to teach movement, I know that every single movement that we teach takes its origin in some movement reflex that we already have, kind of like the basic material for our movement. And sometimes we have to take it way further, and sometimes we just have to find it and apply it. So, for example, we do know how to walk backwards in life, but we don't do it very often. So in Tango, we have to learn it as a follower to do it in a way that is aesthetical and that we arrive in balance and have a good posture. But there is kind of like this origin of, okay, we know how to walk backwards. What I mean is that there is not one single movement in Tango that does not have its origin in some very basic movement that we do in our everyday life. And then I asked myself the question, so if that is true, then the whole leading following mechanism has to have its basic origin in what we do in our daily life. And I started paying attention to all kinds of daily life situations in which I was following or leading physical body cues from other people. And when you live in a very big city like Paris, where you don't take the car, but you walk a lot, and you take the metro a lot, and you take the bicycle, and you go to busy places, you immediately notice those situations. And those situations are very basic. Somebody opening the door for you and you walking through. Somebody led you by opening the space, you follow it by taking the space. Then you open the door for someone and you hold it, you are leading, you are creating space, the person is taking space. When you have a lot of people exiting the metro and you try to navigate, you are following somebody's lead, or you are the one leading somebody through the door. And we do it on such a subconscious level. It is so natural to us to follow and lead by giving or taking this kind of body signals and invitations that we already have it programmed in us. And because we are social animals, this is one of the first reflexes we develop. And you can see it with babies. Babies start at some point to respond to the lead of their parents. So when the parents say, come, 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 the baby starts walking towards the parent. And so I realized that Tango was simply taking something that we already had in our interaction as human beings and taking it into an art form of a very intricate dance and refining it to a level where you achieve kind of like an almost altered state of consciousness because of this synchronization that you're able to achieve. And of course, you have it in other dances that are choreographed. But the power of Tango is that it's not choreographed. You've never seen this person. You don't know what his name is. You hear the music, you embrace each other, and suddenly there is this incredible complexity of possible conversation that you can have. And once I've realized we had those real life, daily life moments where we lead and follow each other, I started applying it into my classes by making those comparisons. So I would explain the lead, which sometimes seems like a very mystical, magical thing to do. Like, how do you explain leading someone without actually touching the body of that other person or their legs? So I would explain, well, imagine you hold the door for someone. And the moment you open the door, the person starts accelerating to take the space because they understood your invitation. And it suddenly brings this whole mystique of what leading and following is in Tango to a very common, very understandable level. Just like walking backwards, we do that in real life, just not as beautifully as we do it in Tango. And that helps people to, it lowers the threshold of understanding of what leading actually is. Because when leading is done really well, it feels like it's almost not done at all.
There are a lot of definitions of leadership out there in the organizational world. But this one, what if you like ran your team, right? As if you were just opening the door for them, if you kind of took this very innate, embodied approach to leading and following, which, as you're describing so beautifully, we do every day, and tried to interact with, your coworkers, right, in that way. And sort of on that note, one thing you're emphasizing here is that we do all this non-verbally, right? We do it somatically. And so much of the, the leadership literature in the academy and in the business world is not embodied, right? Is more like, writing a project plan, or, what you say to people, or what you set up for them in terms of structure with spreadsheets and so forth. So I wonder if you can speak more on the value of understanding lead and follow as a somatic phenomena.
Yes, I think the key word in this is trust. And I will explain what I mean. When you talk about leading in Tango, what it requires you to do as a leader is to put your full undivided attention into your follower, which means you have to listen, you have to observe, you have to react, you have to protect, you have to decide whatever the follower is able to do at every single moment. And the moment your follower has your full attention, this is where the follower will put their trust in you. If they feel your attention is uniquely in your own movement or somewhere else, or you are too nervous or you are too worried about the ronda, the follower will start to feel tense and maybe not give you the trust. But as a leader, you also have to trust your follower to respond. So there is kind of like an agreement. I lead, you follow, which means I will invite you to do something and you will deliberately decide to do whatever it is you understood I was trying to ask you. So there is this mutual trust and mutual full giving of attention. And I think what often is a misconception about leading outside of Tango context, and as you say, non-somatic, not embodied, is that there is still an attempt to create a hierarchy. The leader is the boss. The followers are executing orders, whichever way you verbalize this, even if you put it nicely. So somatically, this means that a real leader would, in terms of body language, be vulnerable and open and give full attention to their quote unquote subordinates. A good leader is on that same level. They have a responsibility, but they open themselves both to give trust and to receive trust. And when they receive trust, they have a responsibility of protection and guidance. And in that sense, it's very interesting to me that we have traditionally always associated leading with the masculine and following with the feminine in the couple dances for understandable reasons. But actually, and especially if you lead as a woman, you realize that leading is way more of a paternal role than a gendered role.
Quick note here for listeners. Typically, the word paternal is used to refer to a father or father figure, but Veronica is using it here to refer to the role of any parent, regardless of gender.
And when you look at it from a paternal point of view, like you are a parent guiding someone, you could say that there is a hierarchy, but it's really not about who is more important. It's about who has the responsibility of guiding and protecting.
I think you are highlighting something really critical here, and I'd like to make an analogy to organizations and teams. And that is that it's the way in which we think about hierarchies in organizations that can often get in the way of the better outcomes we're seeking. So in other words, that command-obey paradigm, it's so deeply ingrained in us culturally that we project it everywhere. We project it on the dance floor. We project it into our offices and work environments, whether we have the titles to correspond or not, but the titles in an organization almost aggravate that hierarchical assumption we have. And then that hierarchy prevents the hierarchy in our minds, I'm saying, prevents that natural somatic flow of attention from happening. And I think knowing that, one could make a solid argument for sharing leadership and followership functions in an organization in the same way that we might encourage everyone in a dance community to learn both roles. Because it's just not going to be possible, for example, for one manager who we name the leader to give their full attention and protection to 20 so-called subordinates. we're almost setting them up for failure if we expect anything more than a kind of command obey type of situation there. But if everyone in the group leads and follows one another at different times or as needed or as appropriate, then we start to have a far greater attentional resource pool to support ourselves in whatever work we want to do together. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and ask you about gender roles and about the disruption of gender roles, which is an interest area I think we share. So I'm going to read another quote from one of your articles, and this one is called "Why Women Lead and Men Follow." Quote, "In every couple dance, the emphasis at some point shifts from couple to dance. The dance becomes complex enough to be interesting as an art form, as a means of expression rather than as a dating ground. The roles come somewhat unstuck from gender. This is often the moment when women start outnumbering men. Tango is still both about dance and coupling, but each one of us lives the two components in a very personal way at every particular moment. Many people start tango in hopes of meeting a new love, only to fall in love with a new dance." Unquote. This is such a fantastic observation. Would you share a bit more about the process of cultural transformation as you see it taking place in dance?
I think in every couple dance and also in other activities, but in this case, I will talk about couple dancing. Each couple dance that we know in Europe with European origins was a way of bypassing the strict religious norms of genders not meeting, not interacting, and potentially finding new partners, whether it be marriage or just a fling or just some romantic engagement. And you see it in 19th century literature with all the balls and all the shenanigans happening during those balls. And what happens in every couple dance is that once it's danced by enough people, there will be a group of people who I can call the geeks or the nerds, who start liking it for what it is. And they start developing this dance further and further in complexity. And then at some point, it becomes an art form, or maybe even a sport, like with ballroom dancing. And it starts attracting people who like it for that aspect, more than all the dating ground that it offers. And once you shift into the dance being an art form or an activity in itself, there is basically only one direction. It can only develop towards more complexity and more excellence and more expertise. It's either this or stagnation and death of the art form. And what happens when the accent is now put on the dance as an art form is that in European cultures, women are less stigmatized when they do dance than men. When men are interested in couple dancing for dating, they're kind of allowed to do this, right? You are looking for a wife or a romantic partner. It's okay. But when as a man, you say, I'm interested in just dancing, it used to be, it's way less now, but it used to be like, what, are you gay? So there's this stigmatization of male interest for dancing, but there is no stigmatization for female interest in dancing. And so women start outnumber men in couple activities, which also means that women start on taking the traditionally gendered leadership role and making it their own. And this is also another shift, which makes that an art form comes unstuck from the gender. Anyone can lead, anyone can follow. And then some women discover that they prefer the leader role in tango. It somehow fits their personality way more. But you also find men who feel that followership in tango fits way more their personality. It becomes this playground where you can basically pick and choose whatever you like. And this is where a dance matures into an activity that has lost all this kind of traditional restrictions and can develop freely, can evolve in very unexpected ways sometimes.
The question of women leading comes up a lot in the business world, the organizational world. specifically, how do we support women into leadership positions? And given that that's a very hierarchical world, right? There's this stratification of worker, manager, supervisor, executive, et cetera. So it's a very hierarchical structure. I just kind of wonder, and this is maybe like an imagination question, like I wonder what it will take there for men to be comfortable in both leading and following roles, and for women to then be able to take on either leading or following roles as they, as they're qualified, as they aspire to. I'm not sure. Like this may be something that's kind of like in conflict with the structure that exists, in the working world. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on like a transition there.
Yes, what I see in a traditional leadership paradigm, and the fact that is traditionally associated with the masculine and done by men, is that there is a certain degree of violence in that model. And so that violence is perpetuated by somebody giving commands and somebody being overbearing and somebody being at the top. That violence can be very subtle. And of course, in a particular organization, we need people to be able to take decisions and assume the risks of those decisions. But the violence inherent in certain current structures does not have to be there. However, if you keep that kind of paradigm and you try as a woman to take on a leadership role, if you go into that model, you will have to accept that you will need to use violence. And when a woman uses this kind of violence, she's called a bitch, and a man is just a great leader and a woman is a bitch. So for me, the real question is, how can we remove the violent component from what we now understand as leadership? And you see it in tango as well. When the lead is done badly, it's done violently. Somebody's using their arms, they're pushing, they're pulling, they're taking the partner out of access, they are going too fast, they're not listening to the partners. There is this physical and emotional violence and a disconnect. So if we're looking for something which is way more a conversation and a collaboration, and we remove this aspect of violence, this is when women can be leaders because they can access the leadership from the understanding of even something like motherhood. When you are a mother, which I'm not, but I know mothers, and I've been a child of a mother is a leader. She will make decisions that will sometimes be life and death decisions for the child. She will protect, she will guide, she will create a safe environment, she will watch out for the child, create a structure, create a routine. And mother is not a boss. Mother is a true leader. And when this role is done well, non-violently, the child can develop in a very organic, free, authentic way without having to obey. There is way more conversation, there's way more negotiation, there is way more guidance rather than command and obey. And I think we need to move towards something like this. A true leader has to be, first of all, non-violent. The communication has to be non-violent. And despite the responsibility of taking very important decisions in a structure, it has to be done non-violently. And this will allow the people who assume the following role in the organization to fully express themselves. Because again, if I take it back to tango, when I dance as a follower, which is actually my preferred role, I really like leading, but I love following because it gives me access to that flow state like nothing else. When I follow, I feel like I am so active in my expression that I become larger than life. I become almost this artwork. I become the music. I become the dance. I give myself fully and I give my full expression, my soul, my heart into everything. And this is only possible for me if the leader is leading in such a way that I have that space. In other words, if the leader is not violent with me, if they're not restrictive, pushing, pulling, commanding, opposing, taking me out of balance. When the leader respects my access, respects my balance, respects my freedom, it doesn't mean they just let me do my thing. It's completely not about me doing my thing. I still follow their idea, but the way I collaborate is a full artistic expression. And that for me is the true followership.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a powerful idea. And I really appreciate how you say it's not about what gender you are, right? It's not about if a man or a woman is in this position. It's about the expectation of what a leader is and does.
And I think you can see a very similar development in how we talk and think about parenting. So we used to have in many cultures a very authoritarian way of parenting, which means I'm the boss and you obey. I grew up like this in Russia. And then in the recent years, with all the psychological research into human psyche, human development of the early childhood and the brain and the babies, we've realized that there are way more efficient parenting strategies that are based on nonviolent communication. And the nonviolent parenting, or what we call gentle parenting, is the true leadership, which allows the child to flourish in their authenticity, which does provide both structure and protection and guidance, doesn't remove any responsibility from the parent, but it removes the violence component. And this is what we call authoritative parenting, where you have the authority, but you are not a dictator. And I see this evolution in many different domains of human activities. I see it very clearly in parenting. I see it also in some more conscious organizations that have reached a certain level of consciousness about what is the good collaboration between people. Is this step towards nonviolent leadership.
Yeah, there's a great term, nonviolent leadership. What a great area for further research. If anyone would like to collaborate on a study with tango dancers, please do reach out. In the meantime, Veronica, I know there is a fascinating post-pandemic story about the Paris tango scene that illustrates some of the cultural lead and follow dynamics you've been describing. So I would love for you to share that story with listeners.
Paris had one of the strictest lockdowns, especially the first one. The second lockdown, the Parisians kind of found their ways out of restrictions. But the first lockdown was very strict. And tango people found themselves stuck at home, no tango activities, no classes, no milongas. And a lot of people found themselves without a partner to be able to practice with. And a lot of those people were women. At some point, we were allowed to dance outside, not inside, outside with masks in public spaces in Paris. And so people started going dancing in those outside spaces with normal shoes, normal clothes, nothing of the fancy attire of the milonga and all the pressure that comes with being very beautiful and very appealing. And what happened is that a lot of women who found themselves without partners to practice, they would go to other women and start practicing with them. And they would go to invite other women and start dancing with them in those public spaces because there was so much less pressure. You are not dancing on heels. Everybody's dancing on flat shoes. Everybody just dancing in their jeans and normal clothes. So by removing this pressure of having to be perfect, women discovered that they could just have fun also with each other. They didn't always need a male leader to practice or to dance with. And also because we have a very strong gender imbalance in tango in Paris, traditionally we have way more women. So all those women that we had way more of, they were desperately looking for ways to continue dancing tango within those restrictions. And they found each other. And once more and more restrictions were lifted, they felt like that was a really fun activity to do, trying both roles, so trying leading. They started taking classes and they started practicing with each other. They went to beginner classes with another woman, changing roles. They went to specific workshops. And once we were able to give classes again, I realized that I was seeing so many more women trying to lead in milongas. I said to myself, well, I love leading. I love teaching how to lead. I'll just go and start leading classes, leading workshops for women. And I started giving once a month an intensive leading workshop for women, specifically tailored to women who already have some following experience, which sets a very different kind of starting point than a normal beginner class. They turned out to be very popular. I still do them every month, and I still have big groups. And what happened once the normal milongas came back with all the, like being beautiful and having to dress up and dancing on heels, you saw way more women lead other women. It was really striking to see the difference with before the pandemic. And you could see that those women who were leading, I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, they weren't giving an F about whether they were good, whether they were going to be accepted or anything. So, and that was a true change of mentality. They felt way less worried about how other people would perceive them if they led. And what happened is that it unblocked a whole array of things. Once the women started dancing more with other women, there were more women dancing, less women just sitting there waiting. So it removed some pressure from the male leaders to constantly, feel guilty if they're not dancing and having all the eyes on them to like, please invite me, please invite me. Another thing that you saw is that women now had more choice. They didn't have to dance with a bad leader. They could dance with a less experienced female leader, but who weren't breaking their backs and who weren't using violent leading. Because one thing about female leaders is that from the beginning, we're very concerned about the comfort and the well-being of our partners because we have experienced violent leading ourselves as followers. So women were happier in both roles. And what I saw and what I especially like is some men finally allowed themselves to dance with other men without feeling the pressure, like, why are you dancing with another man when there are like 20 women sitting around? What are you doing? And you saw sometimes regularly in milongas, women dancing with women, men dancing with men. Men started practicing with each other, double role, going to practicas. I remember I went to one of the practicas in Paris at some point. There were more than 50% were women leading. Then about 30% were women leading their male partners. And maybe only 20% the mixed traditional gender division between leading and following. And it also had an economical impact on the Paris tango scene. Because now women can go take classes and workshops with another woman, they don't have to necessarily find a male leader on their level. There is more class attendance in every single class or workshop, which means teachers get more money. I fill up my classes. And when we teach with my partner, more than half of our students are double role female couples. And what I find very interesting about this development is that I started leading basically because I didn't want to sit down. I wanted to dance. So it's kind of like in the beginning, it was like, well, this way at least I dance. And then I felt like, wow, it's actually amazing to lead. It gives me very, very beautiful sensations. That was what happened. During that development, the post-pandemic development, women discovered that leading is not just a way to occupy their time. It's an activity in itself that is fascinating and that provides enormous pleasure. And for some women, it's what they're looking for in tango, not following. Some women discover they are way happier leading than following. It fits their personality.
Such an incredible story. I'm struck in particular by the sustainability implications of this change because tango communities everywhere are constantly struggling to survive, constantly recruiting new students and new dancers. And here you have such an outstanding case study of how removing the gender assignment from the role itself actually results in more and better dancing and bigger classes and more pleasure. And of course, that's my own personal story, so I'll just call out my own bias. I probably would never have had a tango career at all if I hadn't learned to lead early on. So, Veronica, is there anything else you'd like to share with listeners about your experience leading and following?
If we're talking about tango specifically, what I like about the two roles is that each role has a very, very different set of responsibilities and also a very different set of fascinating things to discover. And in that sense, although the technique is very similar, the real content of what you do in one role or the other, for me, is radically different. So there are things about leading that to me feel like pure magic that I don't find in any other aspect of life. I mean, how is it that by just slightly pushing the floor and creating a micro movement in my axis, my follower decides to start walking? I'm like, magic! How is that even possible? How is it? I will never run out of fascination and admiration for how subtle the lead can be and how incredible the result in the follower. And although following doesn't have necessarily that particular magic, the following has a way of taking you into a state of being that I also don't find in any other activity. It's like a dance meditation. The meditation is the only activity I can really compare it to. And I think this is also one of the reasons why finally we have more women. We tend to have more women in tango than men, because as women traditionally start in the following role, they get access to that meditation, dynamic meditation state very early in their tango life, and it blows their mind. Like once you feel that connection and you get to that state of meditation as a follower where things just happen to your body while you are completely immersed with your attention, you become addicted to this. You start looking for this. It's like surfing this wave. You start looking for this wave. But because as a leader, you use way more your analytical thinking and you have to navigate and kind of watch out on the floor, often you don't get quite to that state. Unless somehow you are either very musical or you have a specific level of experience that gives you that slow state. And I think for a lot of leaders, because they never get to that stage, this is also why they sometimes quit. And I think when male leaders who start as leaders, they try following, some of them touch that state, that mystical state of, oh my God, what is happening? And then they tell you, wow, following is really something else. And I think we as a humanity have misunderstood following, because following for me is following and flowing. That's what it is. I flow intuitively with whatever the situation is creating in me as a response. And I think I will never run out of fascination for these two roles and how different they are and how different are the mental states that you get. Because the mental state where I can get with a follower that is quite experienced and also has the possibility of reacting to a subtle lead on my side. So this very refined communication that I can get to with a good follower, the mental state for me as a leader is I am almighty. I'm literally God Almighty. Whatever I decide in the moment, the follower will go there, no questions asked. They will flow there immediately. And having this level of trust from the other person is quite incredible, where every single decision you make is okay and we'll get through it. And I think this is what a lot of leaders get hooked on, is that trust that the person closes their eyes, embraces them, and just goes wherever they are led. I think that's amazing.
Well, if that doesn't inspire you to go out and learn tango, I don't know what will. Thank you so much, Veronica. It's such a pleasure and inspiring for me to hear you. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom. And please also tell us where listeners can get in touch with you and learn more about your work and your beautiful writing.
So the easiest would be to go to my website, which is verotango.com. And there you will find all my writings for free, accessible. You will find the links to my books. If you want the collection of my writing, you will find my schedule, my background, my biography, information about how I teach, how I lecture, my experience. And then you can find me also on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, with just my name and surname, and on YouTube, Vero Tango. I'm based in Paris, so if ever any of your listeners is in Paris, I'll be happy to give tips about the local tango scene.
Thank you. Please do read those articles, get those books. They are full of incredible, deep insights. Veronica, thank you again, and I can't wait for our next conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is a pleasure.
You have been listening to the Lead and Follow podcast. Special thanks to Glover Gill for composing our music, and a huge thank you to all of you who support the show. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or consider joining the Lead and Follow fan club for as little as $3 a month. There's a link at the bottom of the show notes.